Sorry if we will do it short because I have to catch a flight, so we will try to be concise. I just want to make a few points based on what I talked to you about yesterday and what you have heard from other speakers since then and before. I think it's important to make a general point that I want to make, develop it, and speak about some of the issues. One is the process of what I call the Israelization of Judaism, which also relates to the rotating gravity of the Jewish world from a diasporic nation to a sovereign nation, which means that everything in the Jewish world, more or less, is somehow channeled through or completely related to the events that are unfolding and are taking place in Israel domestically and internationally. This is part of this process of Jewish power and sovereignty, which, as I indicated in my earlier remarks, have brought the Jews to begin with to the state of Israel, including what we talked about, the massive migration of Soviet Jewry into Israel in the late part of the 20th century mainly, but not only, especially in the 1990s, when massive migration came and is still coming as a result of the Ukrainian-Russian war. So we see a prolonged process as Israel as the homeland of the Jews. The vision of the Zionists have not ended, albeit sometimes it's less than it used to be. But nevertheless, the stream of Jews into Israel as a state has continued and increased in variety of fashion, even when people think that the pool has ended. Today, for example, you have a very, very small number of Russian Jews, some of whom kind of like travel back and forth. And of course, we see what happened now with Ukrainian Jews. Only in the last year and a half, remember that the war in Ukraine began in February, March of 22. We already absorbed in Israel 60,000 or so of Russian and Ukrainian Jews. Prior to that, we had massive migration from France as a result of all kind of terrorist attacks. We had migration coming from England. We had migration coming to the United States, even though it was not a refugee sort of migration, but a voluntary migration. We have waves of migration coming from Ethiopia, and Ethiopian Jews have moved, and there is constant claims on behalf of Jewishness of other Ethiopian fallacious Jews or all kind of tribes in Ethiopia, that those who are already residing in Israel trying to save, including during the coronavirus. And this was a very important factor, that Israel is the country of the Jews in all issues. I will make a caveat, interesting caveat that we saw during the coronavirus time. The coronavirus kind of like suddenly shifted the agenda in many ways, because during the coronavirus, Israel had to deal with the subject of entry and exit from the country. Remember, like all other countries. And we did not take people coming from abroad. For a while, the gates were closed. But for Israelis, Israel went to save Israelis abroad from Latin America, from India, wherever they were locked, to bring them to the country. And many Jews from New York, from Paris and other places who were suffering from the coronavirus because of a variety of communal dangers and so on and so forth, knocked on Israel's doors, wanting to enter. And Israel said, no, we do not accept you right now. Only citizens, and Jews are not citizens. That was the first time when you saw that Arab citizens of the state of Israel could come back to the land, but Jews could not. And I spoke to many Jews at the time who said, we felt abandoned. How could you not take us? But Israel took only citizens because they could control citizens, they could control the vaccination and so on and so forth. So the behavior vis-a-vis the diaspora is an interesting case that the coronavirus has put us in perspective. Keep in mind that during the coronavirus, we had 22% of Israeli doctors, those of you who don't know, are Israeli Arabs. So there is this whole idea of citizenship and belonging, and the Jewish kinship ties and belonging that have to be taken into consideration. The Israelization process of world Jewry that has taken place in stages since the creation of the State of Israel, and also perhaps with the emergence of Zionism, because Zionism and the vision of the Jews have a homeland was, of course, already is older than 100 years and 130 years since Herzl came, with variation, with what they call migration waves. Migration waves. Initially, of course, these were very small migration waves. They became more pronounced with the Nazi rise to power, and you saw those who were lucky enough to escape and to move in what was known as the fifth aliyah, the fifth migration, during the 30s. And that kind of like is one aspect that we have to take into consideration now, as the State of Israel is still defined as the Jewish state, and define itself with a law of return, which means that every Jew, whoever he or she may be, is entitled to move to the State of Israel. Caveat again, because of the debate inside Israel right now. As we speak right now, there are debates in the State of Israel because there are those who do not want to recognize the notion that every Jew, whoever he resides, because what is a Jew or who is a Jew? Those, for example, religious Jews or ultra-Orthodox Jews do not accept the notion that you have a grandfather who is Jewish, but but you're not Jewish because your mother is not Jewish according to the halacha, and in fact sometimes try to block even the migration. I remember vividly in 1991 when the Minister of Interior, Mr. Peretz from Shas Party, traveled to the Soviet Union to tell them not to send Jews. We don't want them. To the chagrin of many others who say, of course we do, because he was the head of the Shas Party at the time before Aryeh Deri, and he didn't want to have this kind of like, they will so to kind of like will stain perhaps, because we have many categories in Israel. Jews who are Jews by halacha and Jews who are Jews by citizenship, and as a result of that, they changed even Israel ID card. What is Israel ID card? They used to send, what is your nationality in the ID card? I think I have it here somewhere. Show you. I don't have it here. I travel with a passport. Passport is a different story. But in the ID card, it's a blue kind of card. You used to have nationality, Jewish. But I'll tell you a story. You will laugh. I was married to an American lady.
What?
I was. Everybody make mistakes. This was a joke. She's the mother of my kids. She's my best friend. We divorced. But in any case, it's a joke. I'm kidding. She moved with me to Israel as a new immigrant. Pure American. First visit to Israel is because of this, finding this lovely guy at Yale and graduate school, marrying him. She was Jewish, a family, assimilated, whatever, American. We came to Israel, and the guy, we come in to the Minister of Interior, I'll never forget that, to sign. Nancy's there. And Nancy said, what's your nationality? And she said, I'm an American, proud American. So the guy did this in Israeli, you're Jewish. And then I look behind the door and she starts to cry. She was certain they're taking away her American citizenship. They did not. But the idea of nationality and Jewishness was kind of like, how do we define? What is the nationality? It's not an Israeli nationality because it's a Jewish homeland. It's the nation of the Jews. But when the Jewish, and so you used to write nationality in Israel, Jewish or Arab. The only country that defined Arab as a nation was Israel, in fact. Absurd. No other, you are Jordanian, you're Egyptian, but Israel, nationality Arab. As a result of the new Russian migration, and many of them are designated as new migration from Russia, but they were only descendants of a father who is Jewish, not a mother, by the law of return, everybody can come. Because Ben Gurion's decision was, if the Nazi did not discriminate us, we will not discriminate the state in Israel. So the ultra-Orthodox that came to power, Shas came to power, and the minister of, they erased the category of nationality. No longer. Nationality, you have X's. You don't say nationality because you define only by religiosity. So what is Jewishness? Is it a nation? Is it a designation of a religion? very big issues. The current Minister of Finance, Mr. Smotrich, the right wing, wanted to change the law of return. And this was on the agenda of this government. That the law of return will be nullified. We will no longer accept those who are not born to Jewish mothers or were converted by an ultra-Orthodox or Orthodox rabbi. Big issues with this. This will not recognize, but this is not passed because this will be, everybody will be livid more than we are livid already. So this is like igniting another fire in the state. But this is part of like, should we take those who are not Jewish according to what we regard as Jews? So in Judaism, you should know, it's not a question who is a Jew. The question you always have to ask is who is a rabbi? Are you a Reform rabbi? Are you a conservative rabbi? Are you an Orthodox rabbi? Are you an ultra-Orthodox rabbi? Are you a rabbi of Rabbi Stav of the, there are many questions that we ask. But we certainly do not have a definition of who is a Jew. And this is a big issue. In the old days of anti-Semitism, and especially the issues of modernity which were discussed here, either by the Nazi period or the Soviet period that we heard just now, or even prior to that, such definitions were not at all in the game because they were made by others, they were not made by us. And others did not make this distinction. They did not make this distinction. And if we look at what, where is the, we talked about, I forgot your name. Sorry, apologize. Talking about the dual loyalty issues. The dual loyalty issues were clear in mind that there is a tribe out there. And the tribe, it doesn't mean whether they hold this kind of like prayers or this kind of prayers, it doesn't matter. But this tribe has kind of a conspiratorial kind of issues. They have interests. They have things that connect them together, notwithstanding how much they practice all kind of like religious deeds. This was not the big question. Modernity really brought to the Jews to the question of power, yet without sovereignty. David Vital, the famous scholar of Zionism, has written in his book, the famous Oxford book, A People Apart, which was published in 1999, he already wrote about how the conspiracy of Jewish power started to emerge in modernity much beyond the Jewish real power. And he writes about it, and he said, the idea of the Jews were capable of exerting influence to further the people's interests without sovereignty became stronger at the end of the 19th century. During World War I, it was commonly believed that the Zionist activism of Europe and America was influencing the great powers' decision regarding war and peace. The Jews remained devoid of any real power, however, and failed to organize as a collective or even define what they wanted. Although the wartime activities of luminaries like Rothschild and the banker Jacob Schiff evoked images of power, the catastrophe that continued to befall the Jews proved that these were illusions. So as we are, as scholars of international relations, we know we project power. How much we project power, the projection of power, the images of power are more important sometimes than power itself. Can we influence the Russians? So there is a conspiracy. The Jews can influence the Russians and they will fight with the Russians against the Allies or against the Germans. So we are all consider them potential fifth column because supposedly there cannot be Jews fighting along the Germans and Jews fighting along the Russians. They must have something in common in any case. But the tragedy was, of course, the Jews killed Jews. They belong to the countries of domicile. And this issue becomes haunting to the Jews because of images of power. Sometimes these images work. If you look at the declaration of Balfour Declaration for substantiating the claim of Zionism for a homeland for the Jews, many people may have argued that this kind of support that the Jews got from the Brits in 1917, November 2nd, 1917, was very much because of the projection of power, notwithstanding perhaps the lack of power. All of this, as I would say, have changed dramatically over the years when it became more Israelized. In fact, we have seen also the idea of Jewish power becoming very well pronounced in the case of America. In America, the case of America became very critical when the Jews initially were timid in the certain usage of power, were more restrained, were always afraid that they were labeled as outsiders, so they kind of like the idea of quietism as opposed to activism of the Jews was essential to prevent anti-Semitism. Don't speak, lower your head. I remember I spoke to my friend here from New Zealand. Where is my friend from New Zealand? Remember you told me that over breakfast or lunch, I forgot what we ate already. But I think it was breakfast. So this tendency, but after the Holocaust, especially after the Holocaust, the idea of uniting for the state of Israel and for world Jewry as part of it became much more pronounced. The power or the idea that Israel is providing additional power to the Jews have allowed them to unite, and we have seen it with effective, I would say, results, especially in the struggle for the freedom of world Jewry, of which you have discussed, the Jackson-Vinnick Amendment, all of the struggle, let my people go. Nathan Sharansky, your own now member here, was the hero of that. He became the poster child of American values and Israeli values and freedom in the world as if they coincide completely. The Jews represented the Cold War era struggle. And this was an important moment of everybody kind of uniting, because the idea of capturing who are we representing. The question of who the Jews represented, of course, also generated the hostility of those who were enemies of the same ideas. Keep in mind that 8 out of the 10 people following Lenin in his journey to the Finland station, from exile back to Russia to foment the October Revolution, were Jews. Jews were looking for a status as cosmopolitan before there was a state of Israel. Where we can be accepted. They were eager to be part and parcel of, you talked about yesterday, of the emancipation. If we are all citizens, we will be equal to everybody. In the Soviet Union, of course, they kind of identified also with the class struggle. No longer practicing even Judaism altogether as a religion. But the ethnos was there, and Lenin that you mentioned, never forget that they are Jews. They are universal, but they should be suspicious. They are universal, but they're also particularist. The notion of universalism and particularism always played a role as part of anti-Semitism. Who are you really? What is underneath? Albeit the Jews were the quintessential Marxists. The quintessential Marxists, those who were the architects in many ways, if you look at the intellectual and the intellectual baggage. But of course, there were also Jewish intellectuals who were creating the Jewish socialism, the Bund. You don't know who is the Bund, I guess. How many of you know who is the Bund party? Okay, some of you do. It's not a test. But keep in mind that the Bund, on the eve of World War I, much more powerful movement than Zionism itself. It was a huge movement. And there was even a movement for Jewish autonomy in the world with socialism, which was propagated eventually by Dubnov, Samuel Dubnov. So there were diaspora solution to modernity. They were not... The Bund was kind of like the wing of Jewish socialists that will be identified in the Soviet Union and eventually in the United States, a very powerful group, as the workers that are also affiliated with ethnos, with nationalism, and some, not nationalism. I want to make a stop here. What is the difference between nationalism and ethnicity? People sometimes confuse the two. Nationalism is always the claim of uniqueness that deserves sovereignty and political rights as a state. Ethnicity as a designation of uniqueness. Again, nationalism always involves a political claim to statehood and to independence. If you don't claim it, you may aspire to be a nation, but you don't have to achieve it, but you have to claim it. The Palestinian nationalism is when the Palestinians claim that they want a state. But if you do not ask for a state, or if your claim is dissipated, you are remaining as an ethnos. Are the Basques are ethnos, or are the Basque nationalists? They have a claim back in their mind. Can they substantiate it or not? Are the Kurds ethnos, or are the Kurds a nation? They are a nation as long as their claim is to statehood. And this claim sometimes can be dormant, sometimes it can be activated, sometimes it can be actualized. And in that respect, Zionism, therefore, was propelling Jewish nationhood, not just ethnos. We knew that we are somewhat ethnos and religion. We have some traits as an ethnic group. It was asked for me yesterday about Zera Israel, Zera Kodesh. We knew it's an ethnos. The Russian Empire had minorities. They designated the Jews as an ethnos, always. Beyond the Pale of Settlement, they were ethnos. The French designated as an ethnos, but nothing as a nation. They were Israeliyat. They were the sons and daughters of Moses or Abraham, but French citizens. Therefore, the French had a dictum. As individuals, everything, all the freedoms. You can practice Judaism at home whenever you want. As a collective, nothing. You don't have any rights as collective. Zionism came on the heel of Jewish conspiracies. Because with modernity, we had more and more Jewish conspiracies. What is their claim? And we see it even in the United States of America during the Civil War, when the Jews were excluded. And during the Civil War, the Jews were excluded, and eventually there was an apology for that exclusion. We're not allowed to fight in the Civil War in America. In many other countries, of course, what was awakening the Jews was the cause of Jewish power starting to emerge in countries of domicile, plus conditions of Jews abroad. The Damascus affair, for example, which took place in the mid-19th century, suddenly awakened Jewish diplomacy without a state. Jews were united against the blood libels that were against the Jews of Damascus, which brought horrific treatment of the Jews in Damascus. As a result of that, there were... Go ahead.
Sorry, no, just we were discussing there were Jews who fought in the American Civil War.
And there were not, as a collective, there were a prohibition. You can read my book about the prohibition and so on, what to be done.
The treasurer of the Confederacy was a Jew.
I'm not saying as individuals they were, but as a prohibition.
But as a collective,
Yes.
but they were the individual. Okay.
Yes. There were, of course, I have a whole chapter in my book what happened in Rhode Island, in the courts of Rhode Island, with Stiles, with Ezra Stiles, and so on. I don't want to get into it, but
No, okay, I'm just glad.
yeah, but you can. I recommend 10 copies for each family. David will collect the royalties. For ISGAP. Let's donate it to ISGAP.
There you go. That's it.
Charles, here is the donation. All the royalties for you.
I don't have to give
It's
it
a
back
promise. Here, you have my promise. As long as they read. Who reads these days? Maybe I'll publish the book on Twitter.
TikTok.
It's a big thread, long thread.
Yes. In any case, these issues became very pronounced, and the issues of dual loyalty, which emerged much earlier, as I described them already, in prior to the to the collapse of the Second Temple. You have charges of dual loyalty with the Romans and so on, and you had this concepts of dual loyalty becoming much more pronounced as a social, economic, and not just as a religious loyalty. The idea of dual loyalty of the Jews, or lack of loyalty, of course, emerged with Christianity, and the lack of loyalty to the Christian creed, to the church, and so on. And the Jews were on the periphery. But with modernity, everything came to the fore, including issues of nationalism. Are you a real loyal citizen? including issues of economic. Are you really a cosmopolitan with Jewish kind of conspiracy and the economic sphere? Are you a liberal today? Sort of like, what are you propagating? Even in America, David has his book, which I will read on the airplane, but the idea of sort of like, is there kind of like, the Jews are kind of like something which is not tied to anything. It's kind of like an international progressiveness that undercut this kind of loyalty, which is more rooted, including, of course, issues pertaining to the United States. African Americans, for example, struggle with the Jews, became very much what kind of loyalty the Jews will have. Will they have eventually loyalty to Israel or to America? All kind of questions always were leveled like that in the discourse in many places. And everything in many ways, the categories, and there are many categories here, whether it's a Marxist kind of category, or whether this is a kind of like a herders category of nationalism, or whether it's other categories of the, what's the guy's name, the leader of Indonesia talks about Soros as a Jewish conspiracy in running the currencies, whatever it is. You always have this kind of like the idea that someone is doing something, or Rothschild is kind of running the world with banks and conducting wars. There are always conspiracies. And oftentimes, you take an exemplary Jew and make him the quintessential conspiracy. Nowadays, the conspiracy, if there are, were always tied kind of to Israel. Especially when you have such a dramatic case of the Pollard case in America. When Pollard is indicted in the United States for giving secrets to Israel and this is shocking to the American jury. What needs to be done? Because everybody is tainted. The idea that Kol Israel arevim ze bazeh. The idea that all the Jews, all the Israelites, are somehow responsible for each other. There is a positive notion of responsibility, right? That we are all responsible. You are over there, we're going to come and save you. But there is also liability in this. I'm liable for what he did or whatever. Why are you attaching it to me? And this is a very important issue that you see with the Israelization of anti-Semitism. Jews are proud of being part of the Jewish people and the successes of Israel, but are they always kind of like being somehow implicated in what Israel is all about? Why should we sit on campuses at Georgetown where I teach and the kids will come and say, look, what's going on with Israel and this are telling me Palestinian Day on campus, and should I be afraid? I'm not looking down at this. First of all, as you said, you have knowledge. People don't know anything. Sometimes they have no clue. But they are implicated by the sense, should I divorce myself from Israel? Should I say I do not belong? And if I belong, how much attachment is to me? In many respects, the idea of arvut adadit, sort of like the idea of mutual responsibility, is essential in the minds of others and in your own definition of your responsibility. And that impacts a lot the concept of course, of your identity and the concept of the growth of Israel as the epicenter of Jewish existence. You cannot almost escape from it in that respect. And that is a very interesting evolutionary mode. In fact, and I wanted to think about what you said at your introductory remarks, Charles. While many in the world have moved to the mode of diaspora and transnationalism as a mode that has been kind of like normalized. You're transnational, you travel back and forth, you 1 foot here, 1 foot there. The Jews have kind of more concentrated in a sovereign state, number-wise, and in terms of the ethos and ideology. If you think about the global Jew that was celebrated, it's no longer kind of like an issue. If you read Slansky's book is called The Jewish Century. Fascinating book. I wrote my book, The Israeli Century, as a response to Slansky's book, The Jewish Century. And he said that the Jews were known as the most agile, so traveling back and forth. They're like the global traders of the world, breaking boundaries. Therefore, or maybe are suspected of being disloyal because they are all over the place. And I said, we are now in the Israeli century. But when the Israeli guy is traveling as a high-tech person to Palo Alto, to Canada, to China, to India, he always have a home to come back to, hopefully so. that he knows harkens back. So it's a different type of belonging than kind of a global belonging that is in the sense of a person without roots. The notion of roots, or do you have really roots? The very fact that the Jews never had a claim, think what I'm telling you. While many other minorities after World War I had a claim to territories and were not recognized as nations, the Jews never had a claim outside the patrimony of Israel to territory as if it belongs to them. Never. Never. Therefore, when the Jews kind of harken back about where we're going to be of our state, and it will be in Palestine or in the ancient land of Israel, they needed, as Herzl writes about it in the Jewish state, they needed to make a transformation completely different than many other nations. They needed to move back and reclaim the land. And Zionism was all about reclaiming the land. When I grew up, it was all about reclaiming the land. We used to walk the land, to know every stone. The youth movement, we just walked the land. We cherish the land. We no longer speak other languages. We recover the Hebrew language as the most important innovation of the recovery of Jewish nationalism. Is the Jewish language is Hebrew. We speak Hebrew as a day-to-day language, not just as a prayer language. And therefore, while my grandparents, who came from Poland, whatever, had many languages, when we grew up, we had to speak Hebrew. Their emphasis was on Hebrew, recovering the language, poetry, literature, everything was Hebrew. And the Hebrew kind of wave, which was created already in the diaspora, in the 19th century already in Russia, people started to move like that, the Zionists. But that became the strongest issue. Nowadays in Israel, you have issues with that. What type of Hebrew? On the one hand, there is a total Israelization. Everybody speaks Hebrew, including the ultra-Orthodox. But for years, the ultra-Orthodox spoke only Yiddish. Because Yiddish is the Mamelution, is the mother tongue of the Hebrew is only for the holy tongue. And the debates have been how much of what type of language you use. And language is a key factor in understanding the recovery of Zionism. Therefore, there is a complete division between those who speak Hebrew and those who do not speak Hebrew. How can you be a member of a nation and you do not speak my language? So the diaspora is in many ways in a less favorable position vis-a-vis the Israelis, as if the Israelis are more authentic Jews. You gain your authenticity by being in Israel. Even though in Israel there is a huge debate. What is your authenticity? Nowadays, when we have internal struggle over what is Zionism all about inside Israel, the very idea of Israeli authenticity of the first and second generation is being questioned as we speak today. People do no longer want to have, because suddenly religious groups have emerged in a much powerful manner, wanted to restore what they say, Jewishness over Israeliness. And many people consider the debates inside Israel as a separation of the Jewish and Israeli component of identity, between the modernity and the antiquity. And people in the diaspora are often puzzled by this, but this is an amazing phenomenon emerging. Some people say Jews in Israel, several groups in Israel, are having kind of like a mentalite of the galut, of the exile.
In Israel?
In Israel. Because they do not...
What does that mean?
That means you do not uphold the state as its most cherished and authentic modern Israeli state. You rather reside in the state. But for example, for the ultra-Orthodox community, they don't consider themselves as, in many places, as full-fledged citizens of the country of domicile. They rather see themselves as sojourners. Sojourners, you say?
Sojourners.
Sojourners. Excuse my English. Sojourners.
Français.
Huh?
Français.
Français. That's it. Yeah. Because they're there, you know, if you cannot be here, you cannot be there. I remember Mr. Eichler telling me over the Knesset, he said, you know, why don't you go to the army? He said, if you will try to recruit us to the army, we're going to leave. We are, you know, we run after the Torah. We don't run after the land. The Torah is what unites us. Am Yisrael no'ad betorato. The Am Yisrael noda slicha betorato. The people of Israel were known in their Torah as Saadia Gaon. The sage Saadia Gaon have said it. But from the 19th century on, as Leibovitch have said it, the philosopher, the people of Israel are no longer known in their Torah. Torah was like for the time when they didn't have any kind of like entry into modernity. Now they're all over the place. There are modern Jews. There are modern Jews in America, modern Jews in Canada, modern Jews in Europe. Modernity is what informed them, and their successes as Jews, when they pride themselves on winning the Nobel Prize, 40% of the Nobel Prize. Say, wow, this is not because of praying. Maybe prayed before, but this is not because of praying, I can tell you. Because of achievement in physics and math and so on, that today we have a debate whether you should study it at all. It's a fact of life. Or in high tech, whatever. I'm not saying everybody, but this is a big debate that is taking shape and place in Israel. Do you need a core curriculum to study? The Israelization, therefore, has affected all Jews around the world. And indeed, my claim is that ever since the consolidation and the powerful consolidation of the State of Israel, we have also witnessed the Israelization of diaspora organization. We have David here as a leader of a diaspora organization in the past, or activist. Many of you are, Judith Barsky, others. Israel is a key factor in organizing these groups, key factor in mobilizing support, in consolidated organizations, in creating an ideology. Hardly you will see a Jewish organization which doesn't have the Zionist creed. Keep in mind that the Reform movement, supposedly the largest movement in American Jewry, I don't know if yes or not still. Yes? When they began their journey in America, they were anti-Zionists. Completely anti-Zionist. In 1945, they made the declaration because they were fearful. We have a state, we have a nation. America is our nation. Don't associate us with other nations because that created a dual loyalty issue. And we are not an halachic religion. Only in 1999, fast forward 50 years, the Reform movement accepted Zionism as the number one tenet of their religious practices. Huh?
I'm surprised.
You're surprised?
Me too.
That's why you have to read my books.
Where's Jerusalem?
Everybody, you know, this is I write about it for decades.
But where's Jerusalem?
Jerusalem also as its eternal capital.
In the Reform movement?
In the Reform movement,
You
yes.
can't have other Jerusalem?
No.
There's one.
No,
Jerusalem?
there used to be many Jerusalem. No, this is it. And that has been David Saperstein, and I was there with Jaffa and David Saperstein when I went to Georgetown, did all this work. Believe me, of course you believe me, otherwise I'm doomed. But but it's important to understand that. It's critical to understand that. And that runs counter to other perception. The only group which is now running against this, just let me finish this sentence, which is interesting. And there was there's this guy at Bar Ilan University. I'll tell you because I'll tell you his name in a second.
So how do you
Just
I have a question.
Adam Fertziger, professor of Bar Ilan University, Adam Fertziger, because he did a review essay of my book, and he put this point, which is an interesting point he makes. He said, you think that Israel is the epicenter, but look, there is another phenomena happening in the world, which is Chabad. The Rabbi Schneerson, with all the Chabad houses all over the world, and even Israelis go there, you know, my daughter is in Panama, what did you do Shabbat? I went to Chabad. Why did you go to Chabad? There was food.
Alcohol.
And alcohol, no. Maybe alcohol. But all over. Remember, when there was a terrorist attack in Chabad in Mumbai, remember that? Chabad is interesting, kind of like a global, Chabad is anti-Zionist. When I came to Cambridge with you, Listen to this. Don't say no. When I came to Cambridge with you to Cambridge, we went to the synagogue at Cambridge University. And the rabbi is a Chabadnik. We came in. The first thing he said, I just wanted you to know that I'm an anti-Zionist. And I left the synagogue. I said, thank you for telling me. I can't stand it when you say it like this. That's what he said. And of course, there was a big debate within Chabad about how much Zionism is or not, because they have a different perspective. But this is internal Jewish matters. It's not kind of like, but of course, they cannot accept the modern aspect of that, or they debate it. They don't see it as the founding, yes.
This is a point, I think, I don't want to speak for Maya, but a lot of the Jewish political activists and intellectuals around Obama were building Jerusalem in Chicago. They were building Jerusalem in America.
I'm not saying
A lot of the Jewish intellectuals and supporters of President Obama and Obama himself, they were building Jerusalem in America.
I said America was a chosen place, the Golden Medina. I'm not saying. I'm telling you what the Reform did. People are still thinking there was.
These were Reformed Jews. They're still,
Look, I'm not covering everybody. I'm sure, but I can tell you the official program of the what's his name, Rabbi Dick Hirsch, and his son. This is where they enshrined it. You can see it. You can see the document. It's all in the book. You can look at it to see. This is it. I did this work already in the early part of the 20th century. You can see it, and there's no debate about it. The fact that there are others who may have there is a guy write about post-ethnic Jewry in America. There's a book, Indiana University Press, forgot his name. He said there's post-ethnic in America. They create different Judaism now. I'm not saying it's not, but it's a minute comparison to the state of Israel. There are manifestations of Judaism. Communities, America still has 5.4 or 6, depend who count. And Len Sachs at Brandeis will count them maybe as even 7 million Jews, because you have like not only children of Jewish mothers, but children of Jewish fathers. I don't debate it. But as I asked you before, give me one name of Jewish leaders, you could not. So there are manifestations of community to preserve whatever you preserve as communities. But no one debate the fact that the roads lead to Jerusalem in the sense of this is where the center is, and that's where organization of Jewry is all about, including, of course, in this country, the Board of Deputies. When you talk, I'll give you an example. You are in England. Go to Rabbi Mervis. Prior to that, you had Rabbi Zaks in this country as the leader of this. And I remember Rabbi Zaks hosting me, an incredible person, maybe a decade ago for the high holidays. I stayed with Rabbi Zaks, a phenomenal man. Truly, not just because we're here, truly unique intellectual. You go to Rabbi Mervis, who is the chief rabbi of England. And one thing that he taught me, he said, look, until 15, 20, we trained all our rabbis in England here, over here. Not even one rabbi in England is trained here today, they're all trained in Jerusalem. Even if you look at the Consistoire, you look at the CRIF, you look at all these organizations in France, you look at Canada, of course, and there's not much left after that. Because, if you have 14 million Jews, 10, America and Israel is 11 and a half, whatever, and then France is 400,000. So in the margins, German Jews, it's I'm not saying insignificant, God forbid. We have 10,000 Jews in New Zealand, I learned. Everybody is significant in and of itself, but the bulk of it, of the Jewish existence, of what I call Jewish productivity, Jewish film, Jewish culture. What is Jewish film today? Where is Jewish music? All resonating from Israeli music. What is Jewish literature? Less and less Jewish literature. I wrote a whole thing for the Jewish Review of Books about how everybody, even Foyer and others, are relating to the reality of Israel. So the productivity of Jewish culture, and of course there's huge productivity of Israel centers in America and Jewish studies and so on, and there are of course Mosaic and there's other journals and so on, but look how they move with the Israeli issues at stake. Either they move a little bit history or the contemporary issues of Jews around this. David dealt with the question of that I have to read his book about what happened on campus and liberal Judaism in America, and there is a huge already Podhoretz wrote about liberalism in America before, and I don't want to get into it. But the gravity has shifted, completely has shifted. In that respect, Zionism is triumphant, not in the sense of winning the war, but the case has been won in the sense that the gravity moved to the state. This has implication for the Israelization of anti-Semitism. Because nowadays, and you show it in every aspect, you show it and others have shown it, it's about Israel-Palestinian conflict, it's about Israeli soldiers, it's about comparisons of Jewish behavior. What is Jewish behavior today when it's not in Israel? Which other Jewish behavior? Sometimes they have Jewish behavior like Walton Mearsheimer in America, but it's kind of also because of the Israeli lobby. Remember, it's America Jewish power is all related to empowering Israel. That's the claim. I'm not talking about, I don't want to say bad words about them because they don't even deserve my bad words. Stupid conspiracies as scholars. Big scholars can be also embedded in stupid conspiracies. I couldn't believe it. They even used me as a conspiracy, like this guy who wrote the book Marketing the American Creed Abroad about how diaspora relate to the countries of origin. They put me in the conspiracy. But leave it aside. There is certainly the direction is over there. And the organizations are coalescing accordingly. The programs. It's not by mistake that Taglit, Birthright Israel, is the largest program in the Jewish world right now, whether it will continue like that or not. When 700,000 or 800,000 young men and women from America, from other countries coming to Israel to acquire Jewish identity, almost like a silver bullet. In 2 weeks they go, they see Holocaust, they see this, they come back to America as are Jewish for the next few years. That's how it works. That's how it works. So this is a process that we have been engaging with, and do not make mistakes about it. That's why those who are outside the state of Israel and are feeling the heat of anti-Semitism, oftentimes feeling this heat not just like what you had, let's say, in the vicious, murderous attack in Philadelphia because of this kind of deranged guy that comes in kind of like maybe was Pittsburgh, excuse me. With religious ideas, but oftentimes with the claim that the Jews are related also to their extension of Israel. This is like the attacks in Amia, in Argentina, when you have attacks. This is attacks on Jews wherever they are. And of course, Jews that Israel could not save, including, and this I will end here because time is running and I have to catch a flight, including during the war in Ukraine. And I said, this creates a big dilemma for Israel in terms of also morality. What is Israel's foreign policy should be? When the war in Ukraine began, which is a year and 5 months ago, more or less, right? 24th of February, 2022. There was a question, what Israel should do? Ukraine was invaded. To begin with, no one knew whether the Russians will conquer. I remember I was representing the Knesset in the European Parliament. And the Europeans were in panic. They were sure that the Russian will occupy Ukraine in 4 days. Everybody was sure. It didn't happen. And in Israel, it was like, what should we do? Bennett was traveling to see Zelensky and Putin and try maybe we because they're Jews. And in Israel, the big dilemma was when we were sitting in the Foreign Relations Committee, how should we behave? Should we support Ukraine because of democracy? The aggressor is Russians, but there are Jews in Russia. They may compromise the Jews in Russia. They were already threatening to close the Sochnut, the UJA in Russia, and not allowing Jews to leave again. So we are also responsible for the Jews. And what kind of and we'll do? Can we be a realpolitik that is devoid of the Jews or with the Jews? These are very important issues that anti-Semitism forces Israel also in terms of foreign policy. You cannot ignore it. And eventually, you are kind of like wavering. Are we here? Are we there? It's not always easy to come across straightforward because there is always something you compromise. Making policies is very tough, I can tell you. You have to call the shots. And now we know that Russian army, because we also had to contend with the fact that the Russians are in Syria on our borders, and will, if we, God forbid, condemn them, will they fly their airplanes with the Iranians on our borders and endangering our security? We have to make calculation as a state. Therefore, my last point is, because the state of Israel is a state, and it has to take of its interests, oftentimes what you see is a state that redefines the entire idea of Jewish morality. I make the point, and it's a painful point to many people to read, that with the state of Israel, the very idea of Jewish morality, which was crafted in modernity as a liberal morality, as a universal morality, as human rights and so on, cannot be upheld in the state of Israel, even if you want it to be a model state, because a state has its interests. And in that respect, the Jewish state and the Israelization of Judaism has killed Jewish morality. Not killed in the sense of killing it completely, that you're immoral, but you have to uphold morality that belongs to what the state is. If you have thousands of people coming from the Syrian border, will you shoot or not? The Jews never had to shoot in their life. They live in the diaspora. They don't hold the guns. As Jews, maybe as members of the army of the Americans in World War II and Korea and so on, but qua Jews. But in Israel, whatever we do, we define morality. So the Israelization of morality is also something which is quite fascinating. I'll stop here because I have exactly a few minutes for questions before I run for my cab.
Thank you. Thank you. What?
I just wanted to understand, defy or define morality?
Define.
Define.
Fine. So, quick
Defines.
question. I want to push back on one thing with the religious Jews in Israel.
Yeah.
By an accident of history, I spent many years learning with a Belz Rebbe in Montreal. And he taught me, and we studied, how for a Jew to be truly free, you have to learn the Torah, you have to study, and you have to live in the land. You have to be in the land of Israel. That's the sense of Jewish freedom. Both
Look,
the Torah
living
and
in the land is one thing. The land of Israel, of course, was something that we kind of aspire to as Jewish people in the diaspora. Leshana Aba'a B'Yerushalayim. This is the land of our forefathers. Dwelling in the land was only the aspiration of the few, and many have questioned, why didn't they show up? The Kuzari, when you write, like Rabbi Alevi said, I'm moving. Sort of like he was perceived by the religious Zionist as the first Zionist, which is like 700 years ago, 800 years ago. But by and large, the idea of dwelling in the land, which is the debate between the Rambam and the Ramban, so the Maimonides and Ramban, it's different than accepting the state. You can dwell in the state without having sovereignty. There are those extreme Nuturei Karta, that you go to every AIPAC convention in Washington. They demonstrate, come conquer us. We don't want to be ever state. Nutcakes. But nevertheless, you have to take into consideration that there are voices on the margins like that. This is not, what can you do? So, dwelling in the land as a mitzvah is different than serving the land. And there is a big debate. When you dwell in the land, which is a mitzvah maybe, do you also have to serve in the army or you just study the Torah? The big debate now is about the law that is about to pass when the Knesset reassemble, when the ultra-Orthodox are pushing, that they will be exempt from serving while getting the same amount of money as soldiers are serving. If this will happen, mark my words again, and you can test me on that, explosion erupts in the country. That's how it works, because the numbers are no longer, as Ben-Gurion saw them, as a tourist attraction. We are talking about 170,000 men.
So here and then Larry. Yeah.
Thank you for your talks. I had a thought recurring. I took a module in Israel, and in our lesson on the one state or two state solution, the idea of the no state solution by Daniel Barron was raised. If you've come across his recent book, was published this year, and his idea is that we should go into the diaspora rather than having a state. Yes. And I wonder if you have comments on that, if you've come across that, and if so, what?
I mean, I better not make comments. Look, one thing that you have to understand, one of the things that happened to me, and I'm aging, I can tell you, I oftentimes choose not to go places in order not to say what I really think. I mean it. I don't say it like that lightly. I mean it. Because, you have to make comments on everyone who writes. I saw this book, In fact, it was reviewed, I think, in Tablet magazine with my. If you see, there are two pictures. My picture much better. And it's that's how it reviewed. But I don't have to make comments.
Airbrushing or?
What I don't know. They took a picture of 50 years
May I
ago.
respond
Yes.
May I respond? Daniel Bayarin is a very notorious academic in the United States of America, a Jewish anti-Zionist, who is uncomfortable with Jewish particularity. These are Jews who do not, they want to be in the diaspora. They do not want Jewish nationalism. So, and he's very dangerous. He's very, very dangerous.
He and his brother. They have two brothers. They wrote the book Diaspora. I reviewed. We debate. The book, my book, has a whole thing about the Boyarins. If you're interested, it's a book that you can read everything you see.
And also, very quickly before Laser says something, ask the question. What you refer to the Bund, and I think the challenge to the Boyarins is that the model of the Bund was a catastrophe. It was tried, and it resulted in the extermination of millions of Jews.
Think about where Dubnov ended.
Okay.
In the age
So,
of, yes.
Bear that in mind when you ask the question.
Yeah.
And I remember one thing in South Africa, they talk about understanding and overstanding. We put things in perspective.
Well, in a way, it's being covered, because what I was going to ask is just your awareness that in the United States, among the younger generations, the millennials and Gen Z, there is a post-Zionist, right? There are movements, there are magazines which talk about a Jewish identity, which is post-Zionism.
Yeah, look, there is a whole thing about, what's his name, who is the editor now of Current.
Right, Current is the one
Peter Beinart?
Peter Beinart, I deal with him. They're even attacking the liberalism of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. My last chapter is about the Beinart versus Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Because Ruth Bader Ginsburg was the quintessential liberal of America. So she represented this kind of she's Jewish, and she said the idea was tzedek, tzedek tirdof. Justice, justice you will pursue. That was the sign in her office. And they blamed her for being too much liberal without understanding, and kind of attacking her in the Current magazine on this. I have the whole debate. Leading it, my last chapter is about the Israeli Supreme Court. What will happen there? The book was written in 2019. What did I know that this will explode in our face? I thought it will be somehow worked out without a constitution, but now it explodes in our face.
But they forgot that it's tzedek, tzedek tirdof. I don't remember the Hebrew. Justice, justice shall you pursue in the land that I have given to you. It's not just justice. It's about living in the land.
Whoop.
Sorry.
It's my bar mitzvah parsha, so I know it by heart.
It's your bar mitzvah.
It's my bar mitzvah parsha.
They forget. No.
Gali, as long as you don't bring any memories from your breath, we're in good shape. Yes.
And on that note, no.
Yes.
Well, I'm about to take a class on Jewish identity, so I wish I would have recorded you.
It's all recorded.
It's all recorded.
So I
All the
can get it.
videos will be up
Okay,
there.
so, and I will buy your book.
Of course.
But I was just wondering.
Proceeds to ISGAP.
For those who are declaring Aliyah, you have come from other countries, what are you doing to improve the assimilation, to overcome some of these obstacles you're talking about, not wanting to give up the American identity or
There are, I can tell you, and this is the great success of Israel. My kids grew up in America. There is something magic about Israel, which also is part of the debate. The moment you arrive in Israel, you own it. See? It's really an amazing phenomenon.
What does that mean,
You own it. You have 3 weeks you sit in Israel from France. Zabayit Sheli. It's my house. Don't tell me you have been here for 100 years. Doesn't matter. Because we have been here 2,000 years ago also. It's the idea of ownership, that every Jew who comes make a claim. And then, of course, they said, we have been kind of somehow have been abused, misused. This is nature of all societies. Everybody's a victim. So now the Ashkenazi are the victim. Before the Sephardic were a victim. The Russian Jews were the victims because they were talking, but now they own the land. So I can tell you, everybody owns it. And American Jews, in particular, would, despite the fact that there are not so many moved comparing to the numbers, they have made tremendous impact on the land. The entire settler movement and creed was there. Secondly, every time I said my last point and I make another point. In the debate right now,
Very Israeli.
in the debate right now, very Israeli, I agree. In the debate right now, you see money coming from Uncle Sam, and we see Kohelet. Kohelet is a group that's supported with the money, conservative bastions or Tikva and all of this coming from America. And many people are pissed. The right is pissed when money is coming to the, what they call, to the leftist organization and globalization. People are pissed that they're bringing America debates on between Trump and Biden and this, and injecting them into Israeli reality, as if we have the same debate, and it's all kind of embroiled because of these ties. And many people are really upset about it. So they demonstrate, and it's all over the place. But everybody owns it. And the big debate, you don't tell me how it is. It's ours. You have been at the helm. So there's a whole discussion of privilege that you write about also in your book about, I already saw. So who is privileged? Why the kibbutzim are the privileged one? Well, they created the state. Now they demonstrate against them. We are coming back with ownership of a different nature. So very quickly they feel comfortable, and depends who they are and what they are. But also it leads to kind of like I would say, a combustion of claims and counterclaims of religion and nationalism and modernity and ethnicity and origin and power and all of the baggage that comes with it. I think I should stop. Or you have another question?
Any more urgent questions? Christine, last question.
It's a comment.
Comment.
Very short one. Thank you for bringing up the word magic.
What's that?
I said thank you for bringing up the word magic
Yes.
in relation to this. It makes all the difference. And it stands for me why it's so important to protect and to enhance all of everything you said. I really got a lot out of it.
Toda rabba. Thank
On
you.
that beautiful note, Yossi,
I,
thanks for
it's
being
the first
here.
time I see this lady.
Christine Maxwell. Thank you, Yossi.
My
Thanks for being
pleasure.
here. Have
Sorry
an easy,
that
safe trip home.
Okay, thank you.
We'll see you at 2:30.
Huh? Online. Yes.